Although GM had been selling a utility coupe in Australia through Holden since 1950, it never came to the U.S., but Chevrolet introduced the El Camino in the U.S. in 1959 in response to Ford's Ranchero, introduced 2 years earlier. The body was based on the Brookwood two-door wagon, making it the first Chevy pickup with a full steel bed. It shared outside trim with the mid-range Bel Air and interior trim with the entry-level Biscayne. Suspension was passenger car soft, giving it a payload rating that ranged from 650 to 1,150 pounds, depending on the powertrain, which consisted of the 3.9-liter 235 Stove-Bolt 6 and the 4.6-liter 283 and 5.7-liter 348 V8s for 135 to 335 gross horsepower. Offered with a 3 or 4-speed manual or a 2-speed Power Glide automatic, first-year sales were over 22,000. The 1960 model saw the same styling changes as other standard Chevrolets, but sales were down to under 15,000. It was still 211 inches long on a 119-inch wheelbase, with the shape of the cab and the fins restricting the bed length to 6 feet. And it was effectively replaced by the Corvair-based Greenbrier pickup for 1961. But it would be back again for 1964, this time as the Chevrolet El Camino, making it only 198 inches long on a 115-inch wheelbase. But weight was similar at 3,200 to 3,700 pounds. The bed was more than half a foot shorter, but the payload rating was up slightly to 1,100 to 1,200 pounds, with standard air shocks. Engine choices included a 3.2-liter 194 or 3.8-liter 230 straight six, or the 283 and 5.4-liter 327 V8s, with horsepower ranging from 120 to 300. There was a minor facelift for 1965 and a new 350 horsepower version of the 327, making it a low 15-second car. The Chevelle badging was gone, and sales of this generation would stay consistently between 30 and 35,000. Updated styling for 1966 had length up to 200 inches and added a 6.5-liter 396 with up to 375 horsepower, putting the car in the high 14s. It also gained an optional custom trim level that put it in line with the Chevelle Malibu. There was yet another facelift for 1967, which brought new options to the line, such as disc brakes and the 3-speed turbo hydromatic, as well as required safety features, such as a collapsible steering column. There was a new, bigger El Camino for 1968, up to 208 inches long on a 116-inch wheelbase, and 3,700 to 4,100 pounds, and the bed was nearly 6 feet again. The Malibu level of trim was now standard, and the Super Sport package became available for the first time. Power disc brakes and Positraction limited slip were available options, and the 283 was replaced by a 200 gross horsepower 5-liter 307. 1969 saw an updated instrument panel and available power windows and door locks. It also saw the newly optional 5.7-liter 350, offered in 255 to 300 horsepower tunes. There would be a facelift for 1970 that included several changes. The 230 and 327 were dropped, and the 396 was replaced by a 330 to 375 horsepower 6.6-liter 402. Although it still used the Super Sport 396 badging. And there was now a Super Sport 454 with 360 horsepower, or the potent 450 horsepower LS6 version, for a sub-14-second quarter mile. 1971 saw another facelift and a reduction in power due to mandates for lower octane unleaded fuel and improved emissions, meaning the 6 was down 10 horsepower to 145, the 350 was at 245 to 270 gross horsepower, the 402 300 horsepower, and the 454 365 to 425. Meanwhile, GMC would introduce their own version of it as the Sprint, which was practically identical, with their version of the SS being called the SP, or Sport. A version of the Holden Ute would go on sale in South Africa as the Chevy El Camino, just before the updated design was released, and the name carried over as the El Camino AQ, only 185 inches long on a 111-inch wheelbase, and powered by a 3-liter 186 straight six or a 5-liter 308 V8. In the U.S., minor changes for 1972 included the move to net horsepower ratings. which put the 6 at 110 with no actual change. The 307 was at 130, actually down 9. The 350 was unchanged, in spite of ratings of 165 to 175. The 402 was down 20, giving it a net rating of 240. And the only 454 was at 270 horsepower, down 15 from the previous base version. Sales had been just over 40,000 since the restyle, but for 1972 they shot up to over 57,000. And sales would peak with the restyle the following year at 65,000, up to 216 inches long on the same 116-inch wheelbase, mostly due to the addition of 5-mile-an-hour bumpers. The 6 was no longer offered, making an 115 horsepower version of the 307 the base engine. The 350 now came in 145 to 175 horsepower versions. The 402 was gone, and the 454 was down to 245 horsepower net. Front disc brakes became standard, while steering control and ride were greatly improved. There was a new estate package with fake wood side trim, and the Laguna front could be added via special order. It would get a more formal grille for 1974, and a better equipped classic trim package was added. The 350 became the base engine, and there was a new 6.6-liter 400 offered in 150 to 180 horsepower tunes. For 1975, the 6 returned, now tuned to 105 horsepower, while the top 454 was down to 215 horsepower. New features included remote mirrors, intermittent wipers, and standard radial tires. 1976 models got a facelift with stacked rectangular headlights. The 454 was dropped, and an 140 horsepower 5-liter 305 was added, making the 175 horsepower 400 the top engine, which would be discontinued the next year, leaving the 165 horsepower 350 as the most powerful option. And the South African version also got a major facelift for the year, but it would go away after 1978. The downsized American cars of 1978 were under 202 inches, but the wheelbase was actually up an inch to 117, and the bed was up to 6 feet. Base engine became a 95 horsepower 3.3-liter 200 cubic inch V6, except California models which used the Buick 3.8-liter 231. The 305 and the 350 V8s carried over, gaining 5 horsepower each, for 145 or 170. And the GMC version was renamed Caballero. New packages included the mid-range Conquista or Laredo or Armadillo at GMC, which included a 2-tone paint scheme, and the Black Knight appearance package, which would be renamed Royal Knight the next year due to copyright issues, when the 4.4-liter 267 V8, providing 125 horsepower, was added to the options list. The base engine would grow to a 3.8-liter 229 with 115 horsepower for 1980, but the 350 was dropped, and the following year, both of the 3.8-liter V6s were reduced to 110 horsepower, and the 267 V8 to 115, but the 305 would be up to 150. There would be a facelift for 1982, moving to quad headlights, and the 5.7-liter 350 Oldsmobile diesel would become available. Sales would be in decline, already less than half what they had been with the redesign. The 4.4-liter was dropped for 1983, and California cars reverted back to the Buick 3.8-liter. It was also the last year of the Royal Knight package, and of the Malibu that the El Camino was based on. However, a conversion became available that used the front styling and trim of the Monte Carlo Supersport, although in spite of the SS graphics, it was actually independent of the Supersport package. In 1985, production was moved to Mexico, and the base engine grew to a 4.3-liter V6 providing 130 horsepower, while the 5-liter 305 was up to 150 to 165 horsepower. Production would end in 1987, with the last of the Monte Carlos, putting an end to the rear-wheel drive midsize platform. Although GM did build a concept version on the Lumina in 1992, which was not well received, but was followed by another concept in 1995 based on the Caprice Classic wagon with Impala Supersport trim, which was actually considered for production before that platform was discontinued. Then there were plans to bring the Holden Ute to the US in the mid-2000s as a Pontiac, but unfortunately Pontiac was killed off before that could happen. And the Holden Ute, as well as Holden itself, are now gone as well. At this point, it seems that if the name does return, it's more likely to be on a crossover-based compact pickup. So as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.